Just a retelling, a recap of what happened this past weekend at the ISKCON Leadership Conference in Washington, D.C. It was a snowy, wintry weekend. There was about 4 inches of snow on the ground the whole time. And it was pretty chilly, but it was nice. It was a nice retreat, incredible prashadam. Really nice association with very nice devotees. Prabhu was probably the biggest luminary there, and he gave a couple of really nice, he gave one Bhagavatam class, and then he spoke a few other times. Wow, very powerful, very inspiring. Especially inspiring for me to increase my reading of Srila Prabhupada's books. He's just a walking Srimad Bhagavatam. He's like verses all over the place, and they're all super relevant, and he just flows, He really, his lectures just flow like anything. He's really amazing. And he was very engaging as well. He engaged the audience, and it was very good. So anyway, I don't want to, there's no need to take longer than necessary for this, so I'll just try to go through everything with it. Let's see here. So I have notes in my notebook, and then I also have notes from pictures that were taken. I guess I can tell you a little bit about the format first, which is similar to the format last year, apparently. I didn't go last year, of course, but Yogendra did, so he probably remembers. Basically, it was facilitated and more or less kind of put on by 2 younger people. One of whom is Gurukula, by the name of Gopinath, and he's the son of the temple president of ISKCON, Washington, D.C., and her husband, Ananda Vrindavan, is that right?
Ananda Vrindavan's her name, I don't know her husband.
It's I forget also. But they're both really nice devotees, and their son is incredible. He's not initiated or anything, but he cares a whole lot about ISKCON, and he has his master's degree in some sort of social management. Basically, he does this professionally, where he'll go to corporations or I guess government organizations and stuff, and he'll help facilitate kind of retreat weekends, basically, to increase whatever productivity or communication within a corporation or something like that. And anyway, it all seemed, frankly, maybe I shouldn't say this on camera, but initially it all seemed a little hippy-dippy and kind of new agey and touchy-feely and all those other kind of adjectives. But by the end of it, actually, I was very appreciative of the format, and I thought it was, granted, I haven't attended prior years, but I thought it was most likely superior to the way it had been done in the past. My understanding of how it was done in the past is basically just PowerPoints. Everybody's sitting down, in rows, and then there's one person up front, in front of a screen giving a lecture with a PowerPoint. And, that would have been a snooze fest. I wouldn't have been able to stay awake. Anyway, there's no chance of falling asleep in this sort of thing. It was very active. Most of it took place with all the people present. It was maybe 40 or so people present, temple presidents and vice presidents and representatives. And everybody was sitting in a circle, in chairs in a circle. And then, we break out into smaller circles where other things would be discussed, and then they had us playing these silly, kind of childish games, for example, on the last day, as kind of a warm-up icebreaker thing to start the day, they had us, each person had to think of a jungle animal, and then they couldn't tell anybody what it was, but then they had to act, everybody simultaneously would start acting like the jungle animal that they thought of. So I did a sloth, of course, and so I was moving very, very slowly. And so you had to find other people in the group who had chosen your same animal, just based on how they're acting. And then you would form groups like that. And that was just, one of the silly kind of childish warm-ups. Anyway, it definitely broke people out of their molds, It got people just maybe if they were taking themselves too seriously, or, maybe they're in a bad mood, it quickly just kind of got everybody on, kind of a nice blank slate. And so anyway, they had all of these one of the other things that were implemented, whether it was a small group or there's so many occasions when they would write down things on these big sheets of white paper. And then, so it was more or less kind of notes and brainstorming things and important points. And anyway, they would be taped up all over the room. It was this big hall. It was like an old dining hall in this manor, which is where the main conference would take place. And so by the end of the weekend, like there were these pieces of white paper all over the place, some of which were quite helpful. And so I could just go around and take pictures of what was hanging up on the wall. And so that comprises most of my notes. Otherwise, I do have notes in my notebook. Oops. So for example, the goals for the weekend is on one of the pictures. And it mentions to build partnerships among TPs, GBCs, and support offices. That's number one. Number two is discussing core questions and visions for the future. And number three was developing a collective identity among the TPs. And then it also has the schedule of events, which are namely Thursday evening we connected with each other, then discussed goals for our time together. That was just a Thursday evening, was a brief get-together on Thursday evening. Friday and Saturday were the two main days. So the title of Friday is Discussing How to Meet Our Temple's Needs, with the subheadings of how do we want to work together, what resources do we need to better serve our temples and where to find them, and how do we want the relationship between temple presidents, GBCs, and support offices to look and to feel. And then Saturday, the itinerary was, the title of Saturday was Envisioning TP's Collective Role in Shaping ISKCON North America's Future. And the items addressed were reflecting on last year, dreaming about this year, what would you love to see, and planning for this year. And then Sunday morning was basically just a closing and moving forward and all this stuff. It was nice. And the other thing I'll mention about, like, there were very important things discussed and talked about, and certain plans made, certain things were addressed from last year and stuff that had been worked on over the year. But my main takeaway of it all was just that it was a great opportunity to develop, for me, to build and develop relationships with some of the other ISKCON leaders, and to meet them, to learn from them. The whole thing was a great learning experience for me. I had very little idea of what really goes on behind the curtain of ISKCON in terms of management and stuff like that. And I was able to learn a whole lot about it. And just, some really amazing, very advanced devotees who I was able to take their association and, develop some friendships with. And so that was really nice. And anyway, so the first main thing that was discussed on Friday, if I recall correctly, is basically we kind of broke off into smaller groups, and everybody, they had 6 tables set up, and then the small groups would all cycle around each table. So there might be 6 or 7 people in a group, and each group would go around each table. So everybody had a chance to sit at each table. And each table was discussing one of the primary ISKCON support offices, which I didn't know anything about. But they include the youth ministry, the compliance/budgeting office, book distribution, child protection, deity ministry, and the I guess this is a new formal one, which is, we call it leader, sexual misconduct, and domestic violence. So they have a whole, a group that is specifically there to deal with leader, sexual misconduct, and domestic violence. And they specify leader, sexual misconduct is not just the temple president or GBC acting inappropriately, but anybody in any sort of senior position. So it's actually quite a broad definition. But yeah, essentially, if any of that happens, God forbid, but it's the Kali Yuga, it's material world, these things do happen. If any of that does happen, they have people dedicated to helping resolve these issues, to guide management through the best practices and how to handle these situations. From whether it needs to be dealt with internally, or depending on the severity, or whether law enforcement needs to get involved. So one of the main, I guess I'll start with that one, but one of the main things one of the notes I have written down from my time at that table is that Mukhya Prabhu, that was, I got chastised for calling a female, I'm sorry?
A mother.
Yes, I got chastised for calling a female Mataji.
You gotta be careful about that.
Apparently you do. And I mean, it's we won't go into the the controversy, but it's kind of like, anyway. I won't go into the controversy, but if that's how someone wants to be referred to, fine. I'm not gonna argue with them, especially a senior devotee. And I understand where they're coming from. Women within ISKCON have been mistreated. Women around the world, what to speak of women within ISKCON, but yeah, they've been really, really mistreated. And so, if they feel uncomfortable being referred to that way, so be it. I'm not going to argue with them. Anyway, so Mukhya Prabhu, she has offered a whole lot of the policies and procedures from Alachua. Basically, since they have such a large and developed community, they've also developed a whole lot of policies and procedures. And so she said that she would be happy and willing to share them with us. And I did not get her email or anything, but I'm sure it would not take. I'm sure Yogi probably has her contact information. And it's something I would like to reach out to her and get her to email us the whole package. I'm sure that Madhava Priya Shrai would like to look at these things. I'm sure there's some members of the CMT who would like to consider all of them. So
it's on their newsletter.
Well, all of them? Their whole entire policies and procedures?
No, how to contact them.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Perfect. I mean, I don't have the newsletter.
Well, I get it every 2 weeks.
Okay, beautiful. So yeah, I'll get with somebody in the near future and do that. So otherwise, the youth ministry, this is headed up by the main youth ministry, I guess, initiatives are headed up by another Alachua devotee. I'm sorry? Manoram, right. I was going to say that. I didn't know if I was correct, but I was going to say that. And yeah, he was just here recently with the bus tour, and really nice devotee, younger devotee. I guess he's second generation devotee?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so let's see, one thing, yeah, basically my notes on that, and I had spoken with him a little bit about, I asked him, how can I help, with developing youth ministry in any way. He recommended that I kind of brainstorm, come up with some ideas about farm internships, specifically for ISKCON devotees, ISKCON, youth devotees, perhaps in some sort of gap year type scenario. A lot of times kids nowadays are taking what they call a gap year in between high school and college, or in between college and the real world working. So, I mentioned to him, which seemed to be a very universal problem within ISKCON, for better or worse, and not for better, which is that infrastructure is a big problem. We don't have places, we don't have facilities to put people should they come. We don't have bathrooms for them to use. We don't have places for them to sleep. Thankfully, in New Talavana, it's very warm weather, and it's a farm internship. Manoram was saying, well, hey, why don't you come up with an idea for maybe like a 2-week camp out experience. Mm-hmm. They can bring their tents. In the summer, that's totally doable. And if the storm comes way too bad or something, then you should go in the Katrina building and throw their sleeping bags down or whatever. So anyway, something to think about. I'm definitely going to give it a lot of thought and try to come up with some stuff. Reach out to him as well and touch base and get some feedback. So yeah, that's kind of where we fit into that. But otherwise, there are other things that are being done within youth ministry that really trying to develop that and really trying to see how can we engage these kids. And I should go ahead and mention all these different support services. Most of them do not currently have an accessible website. For example, youth ministry does not have an accessible website. But they are, one of the things that was discussed this weekend, Mukia actually is heading up creating what they're calling a web portal, which is basically just for the temple presidents or ISKCON leaders to use. And it's one website that you can go to, and then it's got links to all of these support offices. So you can go to one place to access all of these different support offices. And so there will be contact info for the youth leaders around the ISKCON North America, and different resources for them to use, all these sorts of things. So that's going to be developed, and that would be very nice. It would help get everybody on the same page with a lot of issues, open up lines of communication. So otherwise, the compliance and budgeting people, I didn't honestly have a great understanding of it. They were talking a lot of stuff that was, a little above my pay grade, so to speak. But I did learn a little bit. I mean, basically, they passed out this, which is the temple services budget for 2018, and it mentions all the different. Basically, I guess each temple has to pay some dues.
Yeah.
To the temple services.
Yeah, temple support office, and the temple support office funds those 6 things, although they don't fund all the youth ministry. The youth ministry collects donations as well. Others collect donations, but the child support office,
ISKCON Communications.
Kaladri's office.
Kaladri is heading up what?
Is he the one who does that?
He heads up the support office.
Oh, he heads up the support office itself. Okay, yeah.
He's in charge of budgeting for that office, as well as, what did he call that? What was the first word he used?
Temple services.
No, something else. Compliance.
Oh, compliance, yeah.
That means all the temples have to comply concerning accounting, management, and other areas of administration. And your bylaws have to be up to date. All these corporate papers, and he checks on all that. You have to make sure that we have a copyright notice on our website, a copyright notice on anything that has to do with ISKCON that we're using public. We have to make sure it has ISKCON's copyright notice on it. Different stuff like that.
When that was brought up as well, and it made me wonder, is our new website, is it compliant?
It was supposed to have that. The old one had it on it.
Okay.
I should check. I thought I mentioned.
I've made a note to myself to look into that.
It's just a matter of putting it up there.
Okay. And I can maybe even reach out to them and get them to double check. So let us know.
Well, you can just look on it and see if it's there.
The copyright and everything? It's not copyright?
I'll show it to you. All it is if you get any of our pamphlets, I have it on, and it's just ISKCON's copyright.
It says founder Acharya should probably.
International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It's set in a logo.
Yeah.
It's a particular logo that belongs to ISKCON and shows that we are a bona fide ISKCON entity.
Okay, gotcha. So, Malika Vaya, I see you had your hand raised.
No, I didn't understand what that was all about, the copyright.
Oh, okay, gotcha. And if possible, maybe we could hold off questions and comments till the end. I mean, obviously, you probably have some nice input, but just in the interest of time, because there's a number of other things to go over, and it's almost 8 o'clock already. So the rest of the temple services listed on the budget sheet here. There's a CPO, the Child Protection, ISKCON Communications, which deals with a number of things apparently, including news.iscon.org, which is the official ISKCON North America news site, which is, I've seen some good articles on it. Then Deity Ministry is also listed on the budget. Legal attorney fees is listed on there as well. Trademark corporate filing, a site. And then office, Zoom accounts, phone, etc. So I guess this is basically it's a shared pool of financial resources just share pool of resources that are available to temples in North America. So for example, if we ran into legal trouble, then the legal temple service office would step in and help with that, right?
Yes.
So,
but they're not going to step in unless you step to it then.
Sure. And the bold things at the end, they said, please consider automatic bill pay, which solves the cash flow problem and it's routine and painless. So I guess I don't know if they're talking about with temple services or if they're talking about that with individual bills and stuff like that. So, but that's just one little note that's on there. So those are the budgeting, the book distribution. That table was headed up, of course, by ISKCON Prabhu, who is the book distribution acharya, essentially. And yeah, basically, they were just, he was kind of like trying to, hey, the dog's at the door.
Yep.
This is a different, this is missing, actually.
Feels like the rain.
So he was discussing some ideas and trying to kind of solicit for some ideas, solicit for some input. I had mentioned to him about Talavana that this idea of kind of a farm oasis for book distributors, which I spoke with Brajananda Prabhu about. You know, he's one of our big distributors with RBC, and he was saying like, oh wow, I'd really like to spend a month at a nice farm like this to just kind of recharge my physical and mental batteries, much speak of spiritual batteries. Being on, he's been on the road, I think, for like 5 years straight now or something. I mean, he takes, you know, a couple of breaks here and there. He goes to India for a month, which can be taxing on the body, actually. And then he also goes, you know, will spend some time at his home base in Kansas City, the RBC temple. But, you know, it would be really nice for book distributors like that, full-time traveling book distributors, if they had a nice farm community to come back to where they could get nice, fresh ahimsa milk, you know, to replenish their brain and you know, get nice homegrown farm veggies to replenish their body and, you know, spend some time with the cows and, you know, maybe even with their hands in the dirt a little bit, help ground them. Because, you know, according to Ayurveda, the Vata energy, the air energy, the air humor, dosha of the body is greatly aggravated by both too much talking, too much traveling, so book distributors are constantly talking, constantly preaching out there, they're constantly traveling around, and I've seen some devotees really suffer long term actually from too much of this and their Vata related illnesses. So to have a nice grounding thing for them to come back to. And that was my input to the book distribution table. And otherwise,
How did Vaisheshika Prabhu take that?
he liked it. He wrote it down. He said, yeah, it's a good idea. So, I mean, he didn't elaborate further on it, but it was this round table discussion that it was like a kind of shotgun round table discussion. We had like 10 minutes at that table, and we had to shift to another table. So it's really just kind of like rapid fire ideas are thrown out like that. And but basically, you know, the main point of ISKCON Prabhu is distribute more books, please. Everybody distribute more books. So that's kind of an evergreen statement. And
The more you show, the more you sell. That's
yeah.
his motto.
Yeah, he's got a lot of nice mottos. He started this initiative, which I'll get to here in a minute as well, but he called it the Read to Lead initiative, where he's saying that, you know, if for ISKCON leaders, we should also be, you know, ISKCON readers. You know, we should really be reading Prabhupada's books intensively. If for anybody, but especially for those in leadership positions, it's really imperative to read properly, right? To read properly. So anyway, then there's the child protection table, and they just ran over some of the basics and stuff. Just made sure everybody was on the same page. Not a lot of new news there. They do have a website. They do have a website, and I got their pamphlet as well. Their pamphlet is here, actually. Safetemple.org is their website. Now, the deity ministry, that table was held by Malati Mataji. And the only thing really of note that was discussed there is that they are, I forget if they're definitely doing this or they're trying to do this, which is basically they're wanting to hold essentially deity worship. I forget how long it was, maybe a couple of weeks. But basically, like an intensive training course in this specific type. It's like a 16-item puja thing that came from. These teachers are coming from India. They're paying big money to bring these teachers over from India, and you've got to pay big money to attend this seminar thing or this intensive training. And I was at the table when Pure Krishna Maharaj at the table was at the table. I don't know if he'd like for me to share this, but I mean, he expressed his views, which is he thought it was not a good idea to do that. But it's basically he was saying it's overcomplicating the issue. That this is not India, this is North America, and those standards aren't required, and they would just confuse people, and that they would quite possibly take away from the higher principles, namely attention to punctuality, cleanliness, just the fundamentals of proper deity worship and pujari service. So he says his basic point, as far as I understood, was basically we should make sure that we're doing all those things really, really well before we even start to consider the more elaborate deity worship. So there's all that. Now
most of the 16 we already offer, but it's just an increase of what you offer in the bathing ceremony during the morning time, for the most part, and maybe even at the arti ceremonies. But most of the items we already offer.
And I think
although our bathing ceremony is extremely simple.
It sounded like as well that part of what they were teaching at this proposed course is better turban wrapping skills. So I guess there's some turban wrapping expert who's teaches you how to put all the nice flares on the turban. Which, I mean, if you want to pay a few $100 to learn that, apparently it's going to be available. And I think they're planning to do that at New Vrindavan. Malati would probably be the person to talk to about that. So, basically, there are a number of other exercises, that they had us do, where we had to really think and really feel about how we responded to certain things. Such as I have a couple of my notes here. Like one of the questions is a time when my relationship with my GBC/TP worked well for my service, or B felt exactly like I wanted it to. And we were supposed to brainstorm about these, and we dived deep into ourselves. And it was, it was a little cheesy, but at the end, it all kind of came together. It was like, yeah, okay, I can see why you had us doing that. Okay, so otherwise, then the next day they had, or maybe it was later on Friday. It's kind of all in blur at this point. But they had us break off into. It was an interesting little format. Basically, they had, we're all sitting in a circle, and then they say, okay, now we need 6 people. If any 6 people have something that they feel very strongly about, a program that they want to see, some initiative they'd like to see worked on, y'all raise your hands, and then you'll come to the middle of the circle one at a time and tell us what your idea is. And then, so whatever idea that was, then we broke off into smaller groups. Each person who had an idea, they would sit at a table and they would head up a discussion on that idea. And anybody who wanted could go to their table. And if they didn't want to go to that table, they could go to one of the other tables. So you had 6 tables going at once with 6 ideas being discussed for different proposed initiatives. And then they did that a second time too. So they basically had back-to-back 45-minute sessions where altogether 12 ideas were discussed. And then out of those 12, I think something like 7 or 8 of them were kind of pushed forward a little bit. And I have written down the primary ones there. The main one that I participated in, I guess the main 2, the first session I participated in the discussion that was headed up by ISKCON Prabhu about, he basically was trying to come up with ideas for getting income for ISKCON devotees, which is also kind of an evergreen sort of discussion. if you're an ISKCON devotee and you don't want to work in the corporate world or in the outside world, how are you going to make a living? And so I felt really compelled to sit at that table because I've done so much research on what Srila Prabhupada said about farm projects and farm communities. And he says again and again and again, in so many times, places, and circumstances, that land and cows solve all economic problems. So, of course, I wanted to sit at that table and speak my voice on those topics. And I did. I didn't shove it down anybody's throat, so to speak. But, I just waited patiently for my turn to speak, and I had a nice quote from Srila Prabhupada, ready, just spoke, gave my little 4 or 5 minute spiel on my stance on these things, and it was well received. It was well received, and, I didn't put it out there in a way that like, oh, this is what we have to do, and if y'all aren't doing it, you're in big Maya, Prabhus, or, anything like that. It was just like, hey, this is one aspect of things. This is a bigger picture aspect of things, It doesn't have to be, only that way. Like, one devotee was talking about, there's so many, like, Indian devotees who are in software and IT, and he was talking about making, basically a devotee software company that could hire other devotees, and so they're going to go work for software companies anyway. Might as well have them working for a devotee software company. Mormons do these sorts of things. The Jews do these sorts of things. It's just intelligent business. So there's a place for that, of course. But the point that I made was that ultimately, if you're playing with the modern economic system, the modern global economy, then you're plugging into a losing game automatically. If you're looking 50 years in the future, because of course all modern economy is based on petroleum. And as we all know, petroleum is a non-renewable resource, and all the modern data shows that we won't have any more fossil fuels in 50 years. And coincidentally, that's what Prabhupada said too. So we can start our software companies, we can start our little, businesses here and there, but we better be getting some land and some cows and learning how to properly utilize them. Otherwise, we're going to be up a certain creek with a certain paddle, or without the paddle, I guess. Anyway, so I made that point, and it was well received. And then the other one I sat in on, there was a healthcare initiative. The temple president of the Baltimore temple, who is an anesthesiologist, and actually from the people who I spoke with, just independently I talked with different people, and there were 2 people who responded. I can't help it. I always, especially with devotees, always talk about Prabhupada's vision for his farm projects. The 2 devotees who were the most receptive, the most encouraging, and I felt like they really heard me out and really understood the importance of this, because they were familiar with what Prabhupada said about these things. Anyway, he was one of them. And I was surprised because they were both Indian body devotees. I was thinking, Indian body devotees, they come to America, and they're not so... They can't imagine going back to farm life, right? They came here for a better life, a better material life. But no, they got it. These 2 Indian body devotees were really encouraging. They really understood the importance of it.
Well, who was it? The Baltimore temple president, and who else?
He was, I forget his position at New Jersey, but he was Mohan or Madan Gopal.
Older man?
No, younger devotee. I've got his business card. I forget if it's Madan or Mohan Gopal. But a really nice devotee. Very, very sharp and really, really nice devotee. So, yeah, they were both very encouraging. And so the Baltimore temple president, he's also an anesthesiologist. So he wanted to discuss how to get devotees health care, which is a crucial point. I sat in on that one because so many of the woofers and just people who come through here, they'll tell me, I'll hear it a lot. They'll say, oh wow, this property is so great. I love the people. I love the service. I could really see myself living here long term. But what am I going to do about my health care? If I don't have a job, how can I pay for my health insurance? And it's an important consideration if you don't know how to take care of yourself outside of the modern medical establishment. And you want to talk about petroleum. Our entire medical establishment is based on petroleum, actually. All the medicines that we get are petrochemical synthesized medicines. And plastics comprise all of it. I want to speak of the electricity that powers all of the machines and stuff, and all the research, that the electricity comes from fossil fuels. So in 50 years, we're not going to have this great modern medical system. It's not going to exist. So anyway, I brought that to the table. And basically, I had a nice quote from Srila Prabhupada, which I've shared in the temple room actually before, which he says that the Brahmanas will provide medical information through Ayurveda. And I think it was, I forget, I've got it on my phone, but anyways, it's a very nice quote, but basically Prabhupada saying that that's the real self-sufficient way to heal ourselves through Ayurveda. So my whole point at that table was essentially that, look, let's look into getting healthcare, absolutely. If we can get it and we can, provide devotees with, whatever sort of modern healthcare they need, we should do that. But we should also, A, be looking into Ayurveda and other holistic practices, learning more about how to heal ourselves naturally from the land, and B, if we're going to offer devotees healthcare, for example, if you're a temple dependent living at Talavana, we can supply you healthcare. If that's a possibility, we shouldn't do it without supplementing that with some nice, solid training on proper diet, proper exercise, proper, just general health advice, general, giving people a good, solid basis of understanding. Because if you're thinking, oh, well, I have healthcare, it doesn't matter what I do to my body. I'll eat whatever nonsense I want to eat, and I'll just sit on the couch and watch TV all day, and I won't move a muscle. And it doesn't matter what sort of healthcare you have, you're going to get sick a lot sooner than you would otherwise. So we've got to bolster whatever healthcare that we give people with, good, solid, practical advice that Prabhupada gave his disciples. Prabhupada instructed his disciples how to eat properly, how to live properly, how to exercise properly. All these things, how to stay healthy. It was a big concern for Srila Prabhupada. That's why he ended up, he changed the salutation at the end of all of his letters to, I hope this meets you in an ecstatic mood, or in the best of health and an ecstatic mood. That's how he ended all of his letters. Hope this meets you in the best of health. And an ecstatic mood, because he was hearing that his devotees were getting very sick. And it was well received there as well. Bir Krishna Maharaj sat at that table as well, and my input was well received. And they also had some really nice ideas. The Baltimore Temple president was saying he had some ideas about how to basically collectivize and get a cheaper, healthcare rate. Otherwise, there's just a few more main items here, and they're from notes that I took pictures of. Okay, one of the kind of breakout tables we set up, one of the initiatives was for, they called systematic training on conscious communication, and basically just to train ISKCON leaders on how to, it's kind of a buzzword nowadays, it's like a, they're referring to it as conscious communication, like active listening. It's really had a lot to do with what Bir Krishna Maharaj wrote his book about, the empathic communication, non-violent communication. Basically how to be better communicators, how to listen better, how to interact with one another better, which may seem a little, again, cheesy or new agey, but it's actually, they're good ideas, and we know that Vaishnava relationships, cultivating good Vaishnava relationships, is so crucial. It's actually so fundamental to our philosophy. So these things should be considered. Maybe we have to talk about them in language that modern people are more familiar with. And so Bir Krishna Maharaj was part of that table. I did not sit at that table, but yeah, they are going to discuss this further. There is, I should mention here, there is something that was established within the past year called the North American Vision Team that Vaisheshika Prabhu headed up. And so it basically, they did similar things last year where they had all these big ideas, and so they were going to work on them throughout the year. And the North American Vision Team, again headed up by Vaisheshika Prabhu, was kind of getting all those ideas and processing them and organizing them and trying to really help push them forward. And so that vision team is still there, and it will be working on the initiatives made this year. So throughout the year, there will be stuff. There may be a way to get involved with that, if that's something anybody's interested in. It may not be, actually. But I think there probably would be. If you're really feeling passionate about getting involved with that, you probably could. We'd have to reach out to them, and we could certainly get that info on how to do so. So, yeah, there's the conscious communication. Another thing was next generation involvement, which is basically kind of an extension for the youth ministry. Manaram headed up this. And so, yeah, they're basically discussing mentorships, youth leader Sangha conferences, media creation, different camps, education in general for the youth. Then another initiative was systematic education of some, such as CPO training, that's the child protection training, something called GBT training, communications training, conflict resolution training, disciples course, gurus course, etc. So they want to get a more cohesive plan in place for how to educate people better within ISKCON. So that was discussed. And then one of the big ones was the GBC Guru Temple President relationship and how to streamline these things. It's a little complex. I don't really understand a whole lot of it. But yeah, basically there's a lot of stuff to discuss there. And I hate to take a short break, but if I may, I've really got to use the restroom.
So, what does that stand for?
GVT, I don't know.
GVT.
GVT, yeah, not sure exactly.
Was it Grihasti Vision Team?
Perhaps so. Perhaps so. But yeah, so there are, basically, yeah, to run through the systematic education, they have goals listed for this, which includes network with existing interest groups, provide TPE names to the GBC College. So there's college for training GBCs, and they're soliciting TP recommendations. I was actually one of them, so I will. That was actually decided on. I will be the next GBC from Talavana. So you can just refer to me as Maharaj. I'm just going forward. Thank you very much. Just kidding, of course. So,
Or is he?
So apparently they said, so there's a spring ISKCON education conference, June 28th. Apparently. So, yeah, so that is on the agenda for the year. That will be discussed by the vision team now, is how to more systematically educate ISKCON devotees on what's important to ISKCON devotees. And the people whose names are on that include Manaram, Anutama, Praharna.
Yeah.
She's Toronto, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the Canadian temples.
Praharna, am I
Yeah,
saying that?
she's was the wife of Vishwakarma, ex-wife. She's
Oh, really?
in Toronto,
And
yeah.
I think she also is head of the
She's a Grahasta.
ministerial abuse group, pastoral abuse, if I'm not mistaken. She's sort of the head of that. And she may have been a GBC secretary for...
She's really nice devotee, and she's
Yes.
very pleasant. And then Anasuya, her name, or his name, I'm not sure, or written down for the education. Then, yeah, I was just, before I excused myself, I was talking about the GBC Guru TP relationship. So this was headed up by Nityananda, the temple president in Dallas, who's also GBC. And so the goals were to form a harmonious relationship between these three people, and then they were basically, they wanted to create a survey and put the survey out to the North American Temple presidents. And yeah, there were a number of issues that were discussed, like that include gurus favoring disciples within their, if the guru is also a GBC, then they might favor their disciples and stuff like that. And basically how to make sure that that's not happening, and there's what they call guru groupism, and to make sure that that's not interfering too badly in, just daily affairs. And then GBC being incompatible with the community. Also was discussed whether the current GBC zones should be changed. And there were points made to that effect, because they said that, like, for example, Bir Krishna Maharaj, his zone includes parts of Europe, it includes Fiji, and also includes some places in the southeast in the United States. So he's literally all over the map. And so he has to spend a lot of money and resources on traveling. Of course, he made the point that he actually likes to do that. He likes to travel a lot, so he doesn't mind it the way it is. But others were saying that it's not, it's wasteful, and it's also, it would make more sense for them to be more local, or more regional at the very least. So, and another thing that was brought up is that there are not enough GBCs, actually. And from what I learned, it sounds like that is the case. That basically Prabhupada said GBC should only be in charge of about 6 different centers. And currently they're usually, overseeing 10 or more. And they're extremely overtaxed. They are very, very much, they're stretched very thin, all the GBCs are. So, yeah, those are the main issues. And the proposals is that they want to increase accountability for all 3, GBC, TP, and gurus, by once a year doing a formal feedback survey that would basically be given to a team that has power to resolve these issues. The feedback survey would be confidential, and they're referring to it as CLAP, which is Community Leaders Assessment Program. It would help define roles, expectations, and responsibilities. Help, make more clear criteria, process, and consultation issues. So, and then something called parallel lines of authority. I guess you know this.
Yeah.
I don't really understand what that's all about, but that's
a paper written on it 2 or 3 years ago.
And
Well, it means like the guru and the GBC of temple president.
okay, I see. I
And
see.
the guru may have certain interests. That's why, actually, just a brief point about the zones. The way it used to be, that, like say the southeast zone, we had like it was Atlanta and New Orleans and Gainesville, Miami, and Houston, and we were in the same area, and we were able to feed off each other. And sometimes there was like we could help each other, like so that was what was favorable. And then that GBC was more accessible to, and spent more time with each temple.
It makes sense. To me, it made sense. Granted, I don't know everything about the issue, but it does make sense. It was discussed in this little area about all this stuff. This brought up about the disciple course, because I guess some of these issues are discussed within the disciple course. And it occurred to me when they were all talking about it, is that a lot of these issues are maybe even more deeply gone into in Sureshwar Prabhu's course. And so my plan, I'm going to reach out to Nityananda Prabhu, who's going to continue to be involved with this, and I'm going to give him a little, plug for the Sureshwar Prabhu's course. And I also told Sureshwar Prabhu about it, and he actually said he's in Mayapur when he goes there next month or whatever, that he's going to be participating in a discussion about these things. And I think Nityananda Prabhu is supposed to be there as well. So hopefully that'll, bear fruit. And it wasn't so much about like, this is a huge problem that we need to, resolve. It was more that things could be done much nicer if we work together and come up with some ways to streamline these things. So one other kind of big thing is the North American Temple Presidents Council that was discussed, which is essentially a regional thing where they break out all the temples into different regions. So, for example, we would be in the southeast, and then, say if there's 6 or 7 temples in one region, then they would elect a single representative for them to sit on the North American Temple Presidents Council. And it wouldn't mean necessarily at all that representative is now like a mini GBC or something. Rather, it would just, they could deal with bigger issues and my understanding is they could, I'll just read the notes. It says, this council would deal with issues of any temple president and make an alliance with the GBC. So it seems like it would be, maybe a closer link with the GBC. So they would elect a chairperson, communication of temple achievements and or problems, staying connected with other temple presidents, supplying peer support, provide good tools to help organize structuring ISKCON North America and helping the GBC, and it would help support other initiatives. The goals would be to, I guess I just read that, it's kind of duplicated here. So anyway, there's all that, and that, I think that was discussed last year. Yogi may know otherwise, but
It sounds like a regional secretary. There used to be GBC, a regional secretary, a temple president.
Yeah, it very well, anyway, that's just being discussed. I'm pretty sure that was tabled or, chaired or whatever by Mukhya, and it was well received also. So that's pretty much all of that, all the main notes. There was an interesting kind of point at the end of Saturday when a lot of these ideas had been discussed, and then it got to about what was discussed last year and why there was apparently a lot of holdup in pushing these initiatives through. And I won't go into the details of that discussion. I will say that, honestly, it got a little intense. It got a little intense at times. There were a few tears shed, and not like bawling or anything. Nobody stormed out, but it was just, a few people got a little emotional, and but it was really interesting to see that the whole thing was very nicely facilitated by these two younger people, Gopinath and his ostensibly his partner, I guess his girlfriend or whatever, who's also his working partner, and they handled it beautifully. They really handled it very, very well, and were able to take what would have other been probably a very tense situation, which could have easily erupted into an argument, or just, involved a shutdown of communication, to where people just didn't want to interact and didn't want to communicate. And so that, they might have taken their toys and gone home, so to speak. But instead, the facilitators really helped everybody work through their differences in a very positive, very constructive way. And by the end of it, there was resolution. Everybody came to a nice common understanding. They had a better understanding of what happened, why they were having the issues they had, and it was like a lot of relief was expressed in the room, and it felt like they kind of broke through, and it really just underlined to me what Prabhupada talks about to express our love for him, we have to cooperate with one another, and so it was a beautiful example of that happening. Otherwise, so basically all these initiatives that I've discussed will be dealt with by the individuals involved with them, and kind of with the helping support of the North American Vision Team. Again, if you all want to get involved with that, let me know, or let Yogendra know, and we can try to reach out for y'all and see if and when you can get involved, such as with the youth ministry stuff, such as with the web portal stuff. I don't know if that's something you'd be interested in helping with. Mukhya is trying to develop that. So there's ways that we can all get involved. With the support offices, I'm not sure if it's really prudent for everybody to really know about them. It seems that it's really just for like the leaders, but definitely everyone in CMT, you should probably be aware that these things are out there, and so the web portal should go online this year. That's the plan. Mukhya was saying within several months she wants it to go online. And that would probably involve a few new websites being put up too for the different support offices that don't currently have actual websites. Anyway, I think that is kind of everything. There's a couple of things I wanted to show you as well. Let me see what other notes I have written down here. I guess really that's all my notes. The one last thing I can kind of reiterate on was just the connecting with these devotees, making kind of forming of relationships with them and getting a lot of nice practical advice, and just, it was great Sangha. It really was. And I think, you know, I was going into this weekend thinking like, man, I'm going to be bored. This is going to be dumb. I'm not going to enjoy my time here. I'm doing the needful, you know. But I went through it, and I really felt like it was very worthwhile after it. And, you know, if I have the privilege to go again next year, I would look forward to doing that. So I have a couple of things that were handed out. First, this one was handed out, which is this advertisement for Volume 2 of Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. Shama Sundar Prabhu's book is coming out with a Volume 2. And I don't know if it's an actual sequel or if it's just kind of a rehashing with brand new material kind of thing.
No, it's a sequel. It continues where he left off.
Ah, okay,
so every year, yeah, it's mainly in India.
There you go.
It's traveling with
His original
Prabhupada
plan
for 2
is to do
years.
a trilogy.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, there's a third volume.
Oh,
So there are notes here how you can pre-order the books, and here's some excerpts as well, and here's the main advertisement. So maybe I could pass these around if anybody wants to see it, or maybe I could just have them up here for you all to look at.
I plan to sell them retail, and you'll pay more to get the book through him retail because you have to pay for the shipping.
Right.
Was he there?
No, he was not. Vaisha Shika gave him a nice little advertisement. Okay, here's how you can pre-order some books, so you might be interested in these things. The other thing, which is kind of cool, Spirit Soul Magazine. I don't know if you all seen this yet. So this is like basically Back to Godhead Light. It's Back to Godhead that's specifically kind of aimed at new people. And so this was designed to be a really nice thing to hand out or to give to new people. It seems to be kind of aimed a little more toward youth. And anyway, I've flipped through it. I haven't read it cover to cover, but it seems like it's a good thing. I think they're planning to do maybe a couple of issues a year, maybe just one issue a year. But yeah, it's really nice presentation.
Who produces it?
I forget, honestly.
Is it the first issue?
This is the first issue, yes. Okay, it is, the managing editor is Ranjita Das. And Chaitanya Charan Prabhu is a contributor. Vishaka Devi Dasi is a contributor. Maya Priya, Ridananda Maharaj, and Satyaraj Prabhu, aka Stephen Rosen. So I am intrigued to see that in the back they have the Find a Center section, and they even have a section within that called U.S. Farms and Eco Villages, and we're not listed.
oh no.
I know. So we need to reach out.
No.
Perhaps Yogi, or I can do it on your behalf if you like.
Well, they should be getting all that information from Krishna.com, so you need to check out Krishna.com.
I'll look into that if
why
you'd
it's
like.
not there, you know.
I'll crack the whip if need be.
That's the only place I can imagine they're getting the information.
Okay, yeah, I will definitely mention it to them. Because yeah, I thought, oh great, we'll be here, and we're not. So yeah, I'll mention that to them. So yeah, it's really nice. There is information in here on how to order more. I think it's in the back. There's definitely contact info. We can. Yeah. It's published by Back to Godhead magazine, and they're linking to Krishna.com. So anyway, there's that, and then the last thing is this new book by Kalakanta Prabhu. It's called The Rap of God, and it is a poetic retelling of Bhagavad Gita. So I was given a free copy of this. So yeah, that's it, and I'd be happy to pass these out. If anybody has any specific questions about anything, please ask me later, or you can ask me now. Yogi, I think I saw your hand first.
They didn't have any. They didn't explain much more about the resolutions that they made last year, the specific items they were going to work on. They didn't have any further explanation about what's going on with them, or whether they just fizzled out, or whether there's actually going to be some accomplishments.
So that was a bit of a point of contention, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And some people were upset that there was not much, to show for what happened last year.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it has been worked on mainly, almost primarily, by this North American Vision team. And Vaisheshika Prabhu really wanted to kind of discuss more about those things. And they basically put more emphasis on coming up with new ideas rather than dealing with the old ideas. And there were a number of, I won't say complaints, but there are a number of, concerns raised that there's not much continuity between this year and last year. And so that was duly noted by the facilitators, and they promised to make better adjustments for that in the future in terms of... So essentially they were saying that, like, okay, well, next year we'll deal with, we'll first address what did we do last year, how is that coming along, what can we do next? What's the next step in developing those things? And I feel like, anyway, there was not much of an update to just directly answer your
Well,
question.
last year, so what in the world are the items they plan to concentrate on this year?
The ideas that I just mentioned.
Yeah, but what are they in a nutshell?
So, in theory, what is going to happen is, so the ideas that I just mentioned include the streamlining of GBC, TP, and Guru relations. That's one of them. The other one is developing a web portal for resources for ISKCON leaders in North America. Another thing is the systematic education initiatives. Another one is the funding of devotees, basically providing income for devotees. The other thing is the healthcare. So there were like, 7 in Vaisheshika Prabhu, he had another one called Read to Lead. He wanted that to be an initiative where it's, really pushed out to ISKCON leaders that we need to be reading more of Prabhupada's books more regularly. And so those are the new ideas. All of the old ideas from last year were not discussed. So I didn't get a specific list of them. I heard bits and pieces of them and stuff. But basically, Vaisheshika Prabhu said they have been worked on by the Vision team over the course of the past year. None of them are finished to completion yet, and they plan to still continue working on them. So I feel like they're doing a great job, but the Vision team is basically there to help the other ISKCON leaders do what they're supposed to be doing, which is working together to make these things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be up to us to step up. And when I say us, I mean it's up to the ISKCON leaders, ISKCON temple presidents, and stuff like that, to work together in the off season during the year and try to work on these things, try to make them happen. So does that answer the question? Cool. And Mike, I like answer.
Can you just tell us, you don't have to tell us the names, but what was it that made the tears, made the when it got...
I prefer not to.
Oh, okay.
I prefer not to. The details aren't really so important, honestly. But it was all together. There was just a little hour-long kind of speed bump that was managed extremely well. I mean, I can tell you a little bit about what happened just in terms of how it was dealt with. So there were a couple of snags, a couple of roadblocks and they did involve a bit of what Yogi just brought up. That, hey, what happened with last year, And it kind of came down to that there were some relationship problems. There was some communication. I mean, not like romantic relationship. I just mean different people there, different of the ISKCON leaders who were supposed to be working on these things together, didn't see things eye to eye. And, some people were even a little offended by some of the other people's behaviors and or perceived behaviors. And so what happened is basically at one point, the facilitators broke the group up. We were all sitting in a circle, and then there's obviously some kind of tense conversations beginning. And so what they did is and I think very intelligently, and I guess this was based on a sort of method that they had studied and practiced. So the people who were present at last year's meeting then sat in a smaller circle in the middle of the room. And there was like 12 of them. There were like 12 people who were there at last year's meeting who were also there at this year's meeting. Everybody else who was there this year was not present last year. And so all of those people who basically knew both sides of the story and could add something to it, they all sat in the middle. And then the rest of the people who were present made a larger circle around them. And so the people on the outside just observed, and the people on the inside circle, they each got, say, more than 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, to go around and just speak their mind and really open up about what they thought about these issues. And so that's how it was dealt with. And then, so everybody got a chance to speak, and the facilitators very, actively heard them all out. And then they kind of, found the pressure points, the pain points, the main issues there. And they had those specific people, in a facilitated way, talk things out. And, I mean, it was kind of like a group psychology counselor sort of thing.
Mediation?
Yeah, it was immediate. It was, the best analogy I give is like a deep tissue massage sort of thing for a group conversation. Just like really digging the thumbs into the tissue there, and like it's painful, but once it's done with, like it's a lot of relief. And so that's how it was dealt with. And by the end, nobody was like crying and hugging and joy or anything, but it was very productive, and they really came to a good understanding, and everybody left optimistic that things would go well over the next year in terms of working on these projects. So, yeah, John.
What was the main thing that was probably going to be pushed?
There wasn't one main thing. There really wasn't.
What were people stressing the most?
There wasn't one thing that people were stressing the most.
What do you think people are concerned about at this time, though?
All of the issues people are concerned about, and they're working on all of them together. There's a lot of things to work on. That's basically. There was not one main point of concern. If there was an underlying point that wasn't even necessarily directly addressed, but was really kind of the foundation of the whole weekend, I think, I would say it would be cultivating better devotee relationships and opening up lines of communication more, learning how to communicate more openly and more actively, more proactively with one another as a ISKCON family. And that's something that the facilitators really obviously had in mind, and I think that they managed to get across that point really well, very effectively, and I think in a very helpful way. So, Christian,
Right, thank you for the report. It's always encouraging to remind us when we hear the president's report, the meetings and what went on, even if it's a small amount, we know it's a bigger world than just what we have here.
Yeah.
And so, wow, they were really working on it. In the past, you hear they're working on this issue and that issue, and we know that people are concerned.
Yeah.
And you know what, Prabhu? I look for Atlanta in the centers. It's not listed.
Atlanta's not listed.
New Orleans is not listed.
Wow. Okay.
What kind of centers are listed?
New Vrindavan is not listed.
Well,
And I'm wondering,
No,
you had to pay for it to get in there?
No. It says for a complete list of
Okay.
centers, go to centers.iscon.org.
Okay.
So it just picked, cherry-picked, or they might have some criteria to pick those.
Okay.
Wow. Well, that's good. They put
New
that.
Vrindavan wasn't listed under the forms?
No, under centers. Not even under centers.
We were listed under centers?
We're not
No,
listed.
we're not listed anywhere.
New Orleans is not listed, Prabhu.
But yeah, I guess if they did
Atlanta.
put all of them on there,
It would be a
it
couple
would be-
pages.
Yeah.
But it would have been worth it because someone might get that who's in Atlanta, Georgia.
Can I be-
How did they choose which centers are then on the list?
That's one.
Yeah, it wasn't discussed. The magazine was just kind of,
It's
it was
nice.
handed out at the very end.
It's beautifully done.
It is.
Well-
It's a very attractive magazine.
Because the Omni magazine, which was a one-time shot, I understand, really attracted me. It was so nice. And I knew Dr. Saban,
Okay.
that the out-of-body article. I worked with him.
One
That's
nice thing too that when I was talking about the deep tissue massage, I brought up that analogy because they had some massage therapists there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did they give free?
Yes, they gave free 15-minute massages. You had to sign up for it, and I signed up for it. I let all the senior devotees, if they wanted to, sign up for it first, but
Right.
not that many people signed up. So it's like, oh, wow. So I definitely took advantage. I signed up, and so they had, a male masseur for the Prabhus and
Right.
the female masseuse for the
Prabhus.
Prabhus.
Can you
For the
still
Prabhu
say
matas.
Can you
I'm
say
still
mata?
with that.
You can still say
It's
mata.
Prabhu, we had to say it in a feminine way because Prabhu is masculine.
That's true.
So there's this feminine in Sanskrit also. I think it's Pravi, if I'm not mistaken.
Pravi.
We're supposed to say mother, but
Huh?
Isn't it Prabhu?
I thought Pravi,
Ravi.
B-V-I.
Oh, okay.
That's what I think. It's something like that.
But yeah, so the masseur they had for the Prabhus, he's a devotee. His name's Amidev, and he is a massive man. He is just a very large guy with arms like tree trunks, And oh man, that was incredible. He gave such a good massage. It was really, really fan. It was just like a head and shoulder, neck and shoulder sort of massage. Really great, and it was a deep tissue massage. And wow, afterward my shoulders were just like it was really great. And so yeah, and the prasadam was fantastic. The prasadam was all brought to us by mainly the ISKCON DC devotees, and maybe the Baltimore devotees were involved. But it was a group of 4 second-generation devotees. They were all Indian bodied and just super nice, very sweet devotees, and they were always like really happy to serve and great service attitude and just incredible prasadam. It was really tasty, and some of it was pretty healthy. Some of it was probably not, but either way, it tasted great, and it was very well handled. And then otherwise, in terms of second generation or younger devotees who were present, it was all of them. And then, so of course, myself, there was Deva Madhava Prabhu from the Ypsilanti Yatra. Who I had never met before, but he's really...
He's really a special.
Yeah, he's Jayapataka Swami disciple, and really, he's very sharp. Really sharp, doing some really creative things, bridge preaching, and yeah, it's great. Kirtaniya, it's great to have his association. And then there were 2 younger devotees, female devotees from Denver. They were representing Denver Temple, and they were both super nice, really had a lot to add. Really nice association. And then Shruti Sagar Prabhu from Krishna House. He's a temple president of Krishna House and the embodied devotee. And he was present as well. He was really nice. And I met him before when he came through here. So there was solid representation from the younger folk, and it was well received too. The first generation devotees, they were all, of course, very nice and welcoming, and seemed to be very happy to have some younger input. Thanks. So, any other questions? It's almost like 9 o'clock. So, should we just wrap up?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.